The Ryan Stick Show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Ryan Stick Show special Monday broadcast. Because we have special news today, we got a reunion with not only the star of Angus, but also their director. Everybody welcome Charlie and Patrick. What's going on, guys?
Hear the crowds? Yeah.
The sound of the crowd is going wild. The fact you're both here is amazing. And the story of how you were cast in this movie is great. I would like to hear both your sides of this story, starting with Patrick, as Patrick's is pretty epic.
When I climbed aboard this project, I had a lot of reservations about how we were going to go about it. The script, and Charlie can attest to this, and the final version of the movie are quite different. There's a lot of kind of beautiful stuff that would be really important right now that got, and we'll get into this a little more later, things about who Angus's parents were. In the original script, his father was gay and married to another man, and his mother was a lesbian truck driver. And,
I didn't know she was a lesbian, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
The whole time I was like, oh, or was she just mad at men?
And when I was offered the script by the producer, Don Steele, I said, listen, I love this script. I love everything about it, even though it had a lot of things we needed to change, as Charlie can also attest to probably, because we went through like 13 drafts after I came aboard. But amongst those things that I said, listen, my big concern is I'm going to shoot this movie and you're going to think it's meant for the high school crowd. And it's really not a movie for high school kids. It's a movie for adults who remember high school with some degree of melancholy. And I said, I'm worried you're going to cut the gay stuff out and the LGBTQ, and she got very offended. So I'm making this movie for that very reason. You can't, how dare you? And I was like, okay, cool. So I guess we're safe. Well, and the other thing I was really concerned about was that it was going to be cast like some Disney Saturday afternoon show or whatever with a lot of, actor kids, jazz hands kids, and unfortunately, when we started casting for the roles of the young people in the film, a lot of what I was seeing, especially for the role of Angus, were a lot of those kinds of kids, kids that were traditionally cast as heavy kids, and they were actors, and they were parodying themselves. They were not sensitive even to what the whole mission of this film was, even in their own lives. Or maybe they were, but they weren't allowed to be by either their managers or their parents or the studios that were casting them. And so I was seeing this a lot, especially in LA. And then we flew to New York, and we saw a bunch of kids there, and then it was the same. There was a lot of Broadway kids, right? And they were all acting their little asses off, but none of them felt like they lived in Angus's world, to me. And so on the way, I was really dispirited. And there was a nationwide search put out. I mean, they spared no expense. They had tapes coming in from cities all over the country. And on the way home from New York, I asked if I could, get my ticket changed so I could stop in Chicago and go up and see my folks and my friends, in little Wadsworth, Illinois, population 750. And so I arrived one hot summer night. I think it was summer. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was summer because we were coming from the Velodrome. Yeah,
because we started in the fall. So
we started October 13th.
What's that?
October 13th.
October 13th. So I'm driving up the 294 or the 94 tollway northbound out of Chicago, heading up to my little town of Wadsworth, and they have these things in our neck of the woods called oases, and the oases are just these giant like bridges across the freeway that contain restaurants and shops, and it's a rest stop, but it traverses the top of the traffic. And it had to be 10:30 at night, I think, and it was hot. I was thirsty. I'm going to pull over to the Wendy's that I know is here, right? So I get out in my car and I walk in. I figure I'll be in and out in 2 minutes because it's 10:30 at night on a Wednesday, whatever it was. And I walk in and there's this line. There's a line at the Lake Forest Oasis Wendy's at 10:30 at night on a Wednesday in the middle of nothing, Illinois. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Great. All right. So I'm standing there and I'm waiting and the line's not moving. right? But I can hear a lot of laughter up front. I hear these like high school girls giggling and chortling and saying, "Oh, stop it! That's hysterical! You're funny!" Right? Finally, the crowd sort of clears, and I see this kid, and he's a big guy for a kid. I can tell he's a kid, but he's a big dude, right? And he's got his back to me, and he's doing stand up basically for as he's waiting for his order, right? Or he hasn't even ordered yet. I'm not sure. And he's with a friend or two, and he keeps talking, and I'm listening to him, and he's very clever, and he's very, at the same time, really sort of seductive for the girls, right? I mean, he's playing it. I mean, yeah. So I'm thinking, and I'm not even thinking about the movie at this point. And finally, he turns around at one point because he can see he's holding up the line, and I lock eyes with him, and he locks eyes with me, and I look at him and I go, "Oh my God, wait a minute." And so he turns back to his order, and he's probably also at this point freaked out because some weird old guy is staring at him in line at this Wake Forest, Oasis at 10:30 at night. And he finishes his order. He turns around and they say, "Excuse me, I don't want to, freak you out or anything, but would you be interested in auditioning for a movie I'm directing?" I had a card and everything.
It's not porn. It's not.
And I said,
porn.
"Well, no." He goes, I said, "Would you be interested in being in a movie I'm directing?" And it was like he stares at me for 3 seconds and he goes, "What kind of movie?" With all of the undertones that you're suggesting, right? And I went, "Oh, it's a high school comedy, like a John Hughes. I'm real. I'm an actual director. I directed a movie called Space Invaders. I'm blah, 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 blah." And I'm dancing like spit on a griddle. And he and his friends are looking at me like, "Yeah." And then I pull out the card and it says, Patrick E. Johnson, New Line or whatever, director of Angus, or what. I gave him something. And
the card wasn't what convinced me. When you open your wallet, I'm a welfare kid. This guy opens his wallet. He's got credit cards and American Express cards. I'm like, "Oh, this guy actually makes money." So,
yeah. Well, that was then.
Whatever kind of movie.
Yeah, my wallet today, you would go running. But so I said, "Listen, just please call Jane Alderman. She's I knew that if my name didn't mean anything, and it didn't, that her name would ring a bell as soon as he did a little research and listened, because Jane Alderman was she was the queen of casting in Chicago. I mean, she just is one of the greats of all time. And so I thought, well, I either scared him to death and we'll never hear from him again, and who knows if he can act, blah, 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 blah. And I get a call. I fly back to LA a day later or 2 days later. And I keep thinking about this because, I'm getting all these auditions and tapes and all these other people. I'm just going, God, what happened to that kid? And all of a sudden I get a call from Jane saying, hey, I got somebody for you, right? And she didn't even know, I don't think, that I said you should call. Or if she did, or maybe her assistant didn't tell her. And I said, "Ooh, what is it?" And she goes, "This guy named Charlie Talbert." And I didn't remember your name. I'm not even sure you told me your name.
I don't remember.
I don't think you did, and that was probably a wise, stranger danger kind of thing. But she goes, "His name's Charlie Talbert. I'm sending you a tape," and I'm like, "Okay, well that's cool." And so she sends the tape, and I put it in, and I'm like, "Shit, it's the Wendy's guy!" Right? So, and it was, there was nothing like it, and he was the only person. It wasn't even close. And I saw some of the.
Now you should remember though, Patrick, I did have to meet you at Jane Alderman. I know. To Jane's to read for you.
After taping.
No, it was that following Wednesday. You said I met you on a Saturday, and you said, "Hey, can you come to this place above Planet Hollywood on Wednesday?" And it's a casting director from Rudy. Can you come upstairs? Can you come to the place? Have a parent bring you there. Blah blah blah. And then when I came upstairs. And I was in the waiting room. There was these double wide chairs, and I was like, "Oh, they're definitely looking for fat people." And this dude, I think this dude leaves that kind of looks kind of in my general ballpark, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, so the right guy." And I go in, and Patrick's sitting in there in this kind of dark casting room, and my area is lit up, and he's like, "Yeah," and not looking at me. He goes, "Yeah, can you read your sides?" And I go, "What the fuck?
What's a side?"
I thought we were inside.
What the fuck's a side? And he goes, Oh, you're the kid. You're the guy.
That's, he's right. He's younger. His memory's better. But you know what? There's something to what I said as well. Because
you made me tape. You made me go back. You said, "Can I give you some pages from the script?" You'll come back here and you'll read with her again.
And I was gone by that point. That's what happened.
This fills in.
I forgot the part about being actually down there, probably because I was jet lagged and insane at this point. That's great. Yeah. And Jane's great. And you, but I mean, it was not even the only reason I even asked you to retape was not because I hadn't already cast you in my head, but because I needed to now sell you to everybody from Dawn all the way up the chain of command at New Line and everything else. Because
I sat on my porch for the entire week because I had a full week to learn the lines and with a lot of dialogue in a rocker like I am in now, on my porch at the edge of my stairs, learning those lines like nobody's business, man. Well, I think I'd skip school too.
No, the great thing was when I showed the tape to Dawn and everyone else, and even Dawn, she was immediately like, that's him. And I said, no, I know. I'm not now. Not only do I know we can make this movie, I know how to write for this guy so that I can take, because if you recall, like, I think at the point you read for it, I don't think the final scene was anything other than you going to the dance, walking in and say, I can't hit you, Rick, but I can do this. And you plant this big Bugs Bunny kiss on his face.
Yep.
And everyone starts dancing Bollywood style. And that's the end of the movie. That was it. And I was like, that's not what I'm shooting. That's not happening. So I had to read, but I knew once I had Charlie, it also helped once I had James Vander Beek, and that didn't take much longer after that I could write these two against each other. I knew how to do that, but I needed them I needed their actual essence to be around a little bit so I could write for them.
One of my favorite things was so I get a call from Patrick a couple weeks later, and it's like, "Hey, buddy, it's me, Patrick. Hey, we really liked your tape, and we were hoping that we could fly you out to California, you and a guardian, and we'll put you up and give you some money so you don't have to pay for it yourself." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
that sounds cool. Yeah, no." I'm like,
because that's the only way it's going to happen, dude.
And so, they flew me out. They put me up in the Radisson in Santa Monica. And I remember going down to the pier before the audition, and I won a blow-up dumbbell that I used as Wanda in the actual audition. I brought her in. And I'm walking by, and I remember going to Ronnie Eskel's casting office, and Richard Hicks was her assistant. And we go into the office at the very end of the hallway, past all the desks, past Patrick's office and stuff like that. And I could see Ariana, her like video or something was on the screen. And I'm like, okay. And I go into the room, and they bring Chris in, and they've got a video camera in there, and we're about to do auditions or whatever. And Chris and I meet, and we start hitting it off. And they're like, "Can you guys hang out for a minute?" We're like, "Yeah, no problem." And Chris and I just start finishing each other's jokes, sentences. I mean, like, we are on it. And we didn't know that these guys were all in the other room watching us via a live feed. And they come back in, and they didn't tell us, by the way. We didn't learn that till later. No. And they come back in, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? We think we're it's a little late in the day. Tell you what, can we send you guys? We'll do this in a couple of days. Can we send you guys to Disneyland? Give you a couple $100, see if you get along."
Holy shit!
But I'm like, who's not going to get along in the happiest place on earth with $200 in their pocket? Chris like, yeah. And they're like, "Well, do you want to do it?" We're like, "Yeah," and we went, and we had a great time. We came back. We did some read-throughs, and then they brought Vander Beek in, and it was really weird because we were uncomfortable with him being in there. So it was a perfect dynamic.
That was actually, we watched that part too.
Yeah, right.
And it was like, ooh, look, that's not going well. Perfect.
Watch my ass.
I'm watching it right now.
Well, speaking of Vander Beek, Patrick, you also told me a funny story about how Vander Beek got the role. What's kind of funny is, like, I don't want to word this in an insulting way or anything like that, but you found Charlie here under a rock, but you kind of gave Vander Beek out of the role out of, like, out of not, I don't want to say pity, but definitely.
Pity's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pity's a pretty good word. Look, he came in. I'd seen 2 or 3 guys that I thought, I think if I have to, I'll be okay with any of these three others. He comes in, and I, immediately knew he was the right type, and that he could definitely play the role. Honestly, well, how do I put this? I didn't know if he fit necessarily exactly the vision of the character that I had in the script exactly. And I felt like I was going to have to do some alteration to the dialogue that was already there and then some in order to make that work with Charlie. And it included all kinds of subtext that was in support of his character actually being possibly gay himself.
Oh.
And freaked out about it because of his father's oppressive, toxic masculinity, right? And that his torturing of Angus was about his own self-loathing for not being able to be who he really was. And that's the way I was starting to take it. Ironic.
It's funny you say that. I just did a podcast with this gal named Kate Hudson, who writes for Vajiva and shows, and Brian Rodriguez at Slumber Party, high school slumber party. And they were talking. I had discovered their podcast where they were kind of bashing me a little bit for my performance. And then the guy, Brian, was like, actually, it just kind of seemed like a teenager who was trying to get through it. And I was like, okay, I like these people. And they talked about how they would have loved to see something just like you were speaking of. And I was like, yes, there's that torment. What makes him so violently aggressive? And that's one of the reasons Vander James never really talks about the movie, is because he was so anti the bullying, and it that really impressed me about him. He's such a great person.
Yeah. I mean, he gave his all to the part. When we started working on it together, what happened was, to go back to Ryan's original question, is that, so he auditions, and the audition was okay. It wasn't fantastic. I think he was really nervous, and which is unlike him, because later on he was never nervous. He was very self-assured and very, but in the audition he seemed to be kind of off his game, and I couldn't tell why. And finally, just before he left, he says to me, "Look, I just got to tell you something. My parents are sitting outside, and they've kind of told me that this is it. Like, this season, if I don't make the big leagues, if I don't get a real part, it's over. I'm going to college. And if I finish college, I can go back to this." And I thought to myself, well, if it were me, I'd tell him to go take a hike and just run out to California and become a star, but I'm not Eugene Vander Beek. I don't have your bone structure, but I didn't say that to him. But he goes, I really need this part, man. I really need this part. The best acting he ever did. And I mean that I am a sucker for people needing desperately to do something,
Right.
Well, that sounds very earnest of him, because that's not him. That's very earnest.
I'm kidding when I said he was acting. He meant it. He was terrified. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I know from having seen some of his earlier work, which there wasn't much of it, but I saw a little of it. And I knew, having worked with lots of actors who never acted before in their lives, that there was a person here that could be drawn out and molded into this character. So I thought, you know what? It's worth it to take a chance. He'll never forget it. He'll always be loyal. He'll always do whatever I want the rest of my career. And so I gave him the part. And
I'd like to think that I helped with his performance. Man, did I pull some on him?
Oh, sure you did. You did. I mean, well, the truth of the matter is, first of all, I can't speak for James, and maybe you've talked to him since, and maybe he's told you one way or the other. I think you surprised the hell out of him. I think that you challenged him as an actor in ways that he didn't expect to be challenged by somebody that had never acted before. I think your naturalness and your connectedness to the part and your commitment to the part actually made him, feel sometimes like he was not phoning it in, but that he needed to step it up, right? That he couldn't just. I don't think James ever phoned anything in, but I think that he was so confident, in which was part of the reason I gave him the part. He was so confident in his skill set that he was sometimes surprised to find that the scene didn't always pivot on his acting. It often just when you thought it would pivot on his acting, pivoted on yours or Chris's or Ariana's or whomever's, you know. So I like to think it was a kind of educational wake up call for him to do the part, and that he developed as an actor doing it. He certainly got, you know, better writing than he'd had before, and you know, and he got.
And who helped you rewrite that? John Lau? Who was it? Didn't you have a buddy helping you with that?
I did 13 drafts of the script after I cast you.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about for a second there. Let's talk about these changes and stuff like that. And Charlie, we gotta. Before we talk about these changes, I would like to just go back. Like, just you're a teenager in a restaurant, and a strange man approaches you. A strange man approaches you to be in a movie. Like, what was going on in your head back then?
No, I thought he was gay and wanted to make a dirty movie. I mean, it was just as simple as that. We're near Chicago. It's, you know, near 12 o'clock at night. He's like, do you want to be in the movie? And I'm like, come on.
I got the camera equipment in the van.
You know, because stuff like this doesn't happen to me or my family. Or, you know, there's no, this doesn't happen. This isn't real. But when he mentioned Space Invaders, that was a movie that I was very fond of. Movies really, I had a pretty rough childhood. You know, my mom and I didn't get along. My mom shot my dad when I was 8 on accident. He passed away, so I had to go live with my grandma and a bunch of cousins. We'll pass that part. Okay. And so it was a rough life, and I was like, you know what? You know, this is movies and everything that helped me get past it. I was like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. And he made one of those movies that helped me through this rough childhood. And I remember going home that night and coming in the house, and you know, you go down this long hallway, and then there was the first door to the basement. My room was in the basement because it was a cool place to go because you could sneak out if you wanted to. And then the main house where my mom was at, she was upstairs taking care of my grandma. And I'm like, Mom. And at this point, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, Mom, I'm going to be in a movie. And she's like, shut up, go to bed. And I'm like, okay. I went downstairs and I just couldn't believe it, and I had to convince my mom that we had to go to Planet Hollywood on such and such a day. This is a welfare kid that doesn't do anything with his life, but you know, plays and have fun.
In Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yeah, this man wants me to go to Chicago to upstairs in a building. Let's do it. You know, and
I have to wear shoes and everything.
Pants are required for you, Mom. And you know, it was just one of those things where I was like, okay. And going into that room the first time, I felt like I was in a lair because I don't know if you remember this, but you were behind her desk, and her office was very much like a stately office. It was not like a normal casting room office. No. And he was behind this wooden, beautiful desk and dark mahogany. And I go in the room, and I think I'm in front of like a bluish kind of screen. And he's like, go ahead and read your sides. And I was like, you know, what's a side? And he's like, and he goes, oh, you're the kid. And he goes, well, tell me about yourself. And I kind of told him about my life, and it really kind of fit in. I mean, I was in love with a girl from kindergarten to 12th grade, and I projected her into that person, Melissa Lefevre. And I was really honest with him about everything about me, because I kind of felt like I needed to touch that part of him to get him to realize maybe I'm the guy that's right for this, because he kind of told me about the story. And he goes, can you what else about you? And I go, I do impersonations. He goes, really? Like, what do you do? And I go, oh, I do Elvis Presley and Jim Morrison. And like, I did my Elvis for him. He's like, nice. He's like, what's your Jim Morrison? And I just turn around and go to the corner with my back facing him and just start mumbling the words to his and he goes, that's pretty clever.
That's great.
And then, and then he asked me if I would come and, read the sides and everything now that I know what they are. And I don't even remember going back to read for Jane. I just felt like he's gone now. I lost the chance to be in this movie. It's all downhill from here, and keep going on.
Almost
see what
escaped,
happens.
Charlie.
I almost
got away.
So when was the decision made that Charlie had the role? Because I'm sure you had to convince people to be like, hey, all those showbiz Disney kids that come in with the jazz hands that have experience. Well, I found this kid at midnight in a Wendy's, and I think he'll do the job better than any of these other kids. When were you allowed to say, Charlie, you got the part? You're our Angus.
Gosh, I want to say, and Charlie will know better than me because he lived it from that point of view, but I don't think it took more than a week from him reading.
I said 2 weeks. That's crazy. I said
it's somewhere in there, but if it was 2 weeks, it felt like a week to me, because I actually knew the minute I kind of knew the minute I met him, to be honest with you. I really did. And what I also knew was that I had to go through a process, that they weren't going to just have me come home from Chicago and go, found him, we're done. Let's make the whole movie, $13 million. Let's go on this kid you've never heard of or seen. I got this. No, but that was okay. I was really actually more worried that Charlie was going to get cold feet if it took more than 48 hours, just because he didn't know how these processes work, or his parents might be like, they're full of shit. They didn't call you. Who knows? I was more concerned that I'd say yes, and Charlie would be like, oh no, too late, man. I took a job at Great America or whatever. I don't know. I just, I didn't know. And I was really worried about losing him. So I had to really work it when I got back to town. And I also had to go through the process of meeting some semi-famous kids at this point, because the movie had taken on a bit of a life of its own, and we were starting to see, plus we had, by this point, I think already we had Kathy Bates. I think I had already met with George C. Scott and convinced him to be in the film. And I think Rita Moreno was on the bubble. So, I already had 3 Oscar winners in this film. So suddenly all the agents and all the managers were sending the best of their best. And there were a couple of known kids that you could plug into this part, and they would come in, and they were a lot of attitude and a lot of acting and a lot of trying to be funny. When the movie's not a comedy. It's funny, but it's not a comedy. And it's certainly, the humor that is in it isn't really jokes. It's natural, real situations that are played for real. And they're funny because they're charming, and because you get it. You probably lived a version of it if you were human. And so I when I had these performers coming in and trying to put their comedy polish on everything, it was like, none of that's charming. None of that's interesting. So, I knew that unless I was forced by the studio to not cast him, that he had the part.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I remember getting that call too. Patrick called me up sometime after school, and like, hey, some guy named Patrick's on the phone for you. Like, they go to the phone, and he's like, hey man. I'm like, hey, what's up? He's like, dude, I'm sorry, brother. I really appreciate you coming out and reading for it and all that, but it looks like you're gonna have to spend a few months with us. Is that cool? And I'm like, all depressed. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're gonna actually have to do it now.
Yeah, man, he got me too. My heart went from shattered to, oh my God, get the pieces. It's okay. And then I think the first place I had to come out, and we did some reads together. And then the first place we read shot was here, when it was the lunchbox.
Yeah, that was our first day of shooting, I believe, was right there. And I kind of wish it hadn't been, only because there was so much about that scene.
The chemistry.
I have to say it's probably my least favorite scene in the movie, because I didn't rewrite it. I left it as it was, and the jokes, or not the jokes, but the dialogue in it was some of my least favorite in the film. And this snot thing and the whole thing. I was just like, there were a lot of holdover bits from the original script that, certain people in the administration or the studio or above me liked, that I didn't like. And it was you two guys suddenly holding this giant thing together all on your own, in a scene that was mostly about the connection between really Angus and Rick over, Melissa. And that part of the scene kind of works because it's silent. There's no dialogue involved. It's looks, it's awareness of who's looking at whom. That's the part of the scene that I like. It's not that Charlie or Chris did anything wrong in their performances. There's nothing wrong with it, other than it's just kind of for me, it was like placeholder dialogue. And
the writing was a little forced. The chemistry was overshadowed by the snot. I remember Chris and I talking about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, does it really, and I was too young to know if that would be a playthrough through the film or understand what that meant. Right. And by the time it was done. But it was, it was a glorious moment because that was
your first day.
That you guys, you made that house into a lunchbox. That right across the way from the school,
there was just a little house across the street that we turned into the lunchbox. But the funny thing is too, at the time as a director and also working, for the people I was working for, on the first day of shooting, it's not always the best idea to say, you know what, throw the script away. Let's just play. Let's just try, right? Well, and if I did it again today, I would have done that. I would have said, forget this dialogue. I would have shot a take or two of it just to say I did it and meet the schedule and meet the parameters of my, hiring. But I would have loved to have let you guys free. But I also was worried that if I let you improv on the first day, that you might get so into that learning your lines for all the other scenes might become less important to you. Let us just play like we did the other day. A lot of, balancing act going on that day, trying to please too many masters, really, to be honest with you. But it was awesome to shoot it. And it was great to have all the main characters in the scene. That was terrific. Like having Kevin there and having,
Salim.
Awesome. Yeah, Salim. Yeah. And having everybody in one scene was nice for just bonding the cast a little bit, even if you didn't all interact directly. I thought it worked. That part I liked a lot. I think that was the day we shot the school bus exit as well, the slow motion.
That's right. Yeah.
Which
right.
Now that's
also the day that Dawn taught me to not repeat my grandparents' speakings. I don't know if you remember, but somebody got ripped off for something. I was like, you got chewed out of something? And Dawn, Jewish, goes, did you just say? And she took me aside, and there's this great picture of me and her having dialogue. And people were like, oh, that's from the movie. I'm like, no, this is her teaching me reality. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, but I love, but you exiting that bus was one of my favorite moments in the film. That
was fun. Yeah.
Silent. It's all done. It's music. It's your acting and the photography, the whole thing, everything about that. It's not.
And soundtrack.
It's not Lawrence of Arabia, but it has a really nice quality to it, and it always got a great response in screenings that I saw. So,
yeah, and also soundtrack. The soundtrack of this movie provided I find the soul, and I think the reason why a movie like this spoke to me so much when I was watching it is that I wasn't watching a bunch of 30-year-olds pretending they were 16. This felt like almost like it was happening. And almost not like a documentary, but a lot more plausible than other high school movies that would really, I don't know. It was a dance too. It wasn't the prom. It was kind of really said in this is just a thing that's happening. And a reason why I came into this movie. I found out about this movie because you guys had this B-side Green Day song that was exclusive to the movie, and I got
no B-side.
No, it's an amazing song. It's amazing.
But it was written for the movie.
Well, there you go.
It wasn't even like something that we discovered or that was in their catalog. They wrote it specifically for the film, and honestly, I didn't really know who the fuck Green Day was when we started this movie.
My friend drove off the other day. Now he's gone and all they say is you gotta live 'cause life goes on.
You have to understand the producer and her partner Bob Cavallo were the managers of all the pretty much all the bands that are on there except for Peter Gabriel and Mazzy Star, but almost every. Oh, and they weren't the managers of Love Spit Love. That was Richard Butler.
Did they have Katie Lang, who we ended up?
No, they did. Well, we ended up not using Katie Lang. It's actually Jane Siberry with Katie Lang singing backup because Jane Siberry's become a friend since then. Originally, the final dance with Angus and Melissa was scored with Calling All Angels.
Calling All Angels, yeah. I remember they played it over and over.
Stunning. I love what's there now. The Fade Into You works. It works great. Audiences love it. But if you'd ever seen a screening with Calling All Angels, it was a heartbreaker.
Calling all angels, calling all angels, walk me through this one, don't leave me alone.
But Dawn hated this song. I think she thought it was religious, and it's not. I mean, neither Katie Lang nor Jane Siberry were religious. They were using an allegory, you know, and they created this song that was really just about we need help, you know. So we're calling all angels. It's like the radio to the universe. It had nothing to do with actual religion. But Dawn was like, that's no religion in this movie. I'm like, it's not religion.
Well, there's a lot of other stuff that didn't make it in the movie, like all those gay subplots and stuff like that. Like it seems tame in comparison of what you guys were trying to accomplish. Because nowadays, a lot of teen comedies, they'll really, you know what? If you made this movie, like if it was a Canadian production, I think the Canadian production would have went for it because we had a lot.
We shot it. We shot all of it.
In fact, on TBS, remember the TBS? They had an airing of it with the Larry Drake scene where I ride up to his house on the bike and I'm sitting in the kitchen with him and he's kind of telling me about life. That TBS version, I was like, wait, where's that? And it just disappeared. It played for a couple months and then just disappeared.
Can you give context to that scene you're talking about that got taken away and put in? Like,
what it was is that, you know, Angus he said, Mom, I'm really confused. I need to talk to you about this girl. And she's like, you know, working on the mud flaps for her truck. And she's like, you know what? Ask your father. This might be better talk to have with your father, right? And he's like, well, okay, this is a little awkward because I don't like girls. I mean, there were these wonderful bookended scenes, all of it. And Larry Drake, you know, played Angus's father really nicely. It all worked. The problem was, after all that protestation about, you know, we're making the movie to support, you know, gay rights and gay, you know, and understanding and all this stuff. The first test screening we had in Orange County, California, some jock literally in a Letterman jacket yells out, "The dad's a fag!"
Wow.
And the next day I get notes from the studio, lose the gay father. And I was like, excuse me? Lose the gay father. People hate him. And I'm like, no. People don't hate him. A guy in Orange County, one person, one asshole doesn't get him and doesn't want to get him. And I said, the fact that the guy said that is probably the best thing you could do. Controversy would be awesome. Let's keep it in and make noise. Let's let people fight about it. You know, and they're like, no. And it was literally the people that were telling me to take this out some of them were actually gay. And I said, are you serious? How can you do this? Right. And so I finally, I actually put both my career and the movie, well, not the movie so much, but I put myself at pretty great risk by saying, you know, if you pull all of this material out, I'm going to make this an Alan Smithee film. I'm going to take my name off and you're going to have to put Alan Smithee on the front of this movie. And they lost their fucking minds because they were like, that's the kiss of death, right? Alan Smithee in the credits, it means, you know, distributors are like, you know, or exhibitors are like, we don't want, you know, it's not going to. And finally, I couldn't really fight City Hall as much as I wanted to. And and the producers in the studio came in at one point after I'd had my cut and said, why don't you go to Hawaii for a while and we'll just do some nip and tuck. And I came back and they'd cut everything. They'd cut all the material that they said meant so much to them. And
I was so angry. I remember that. I remember they didn't know I was with Chris and he had to go do ADR for the scene where Rick knocks it down. He's doing the, thing where, and I'm watching the scenes before and after and there's no Patrick. And I was so angry. I was crying. They had to take me out and talk to me. I was devastated. Yeah. And I still am to this day.
I think, the saddest part of all, you know, and I probably can't even legally talk about what I finally did. At one point I was offered $500,000 to not recut, to not do my final director's cut, to just walk away. They literally, I got a call from my manager who said, you're being offered $500,000 to walk away. I was above what I was paid. I was already paid, you know, whatever it was. It was a lot of money. And then in post, they offered me $500,000 check if I would walk away and not try to save what was left of the film when they were done cutting it to pieces. And I told my manager, I said, I want you to call the people who had offered me this. And I want you to write this down. It's very important that you say this, extraordinarily carefully. I want you to get my words exactly right. Right? Please tell the people who have offered me $500,000 to walk away the following thing. Ready? Are you writing this down? And my manager's like, yeah, I'm writing it all down. I said, okay, fuck you. And then I didn't get $500,000. I got about 5 more weeks of cutting, or whatever it was, 6 more weeks of cutting. And we at least restored what was left of it and sewed up the bleeders and, reattached some limbs and made the film that came out. But it always destroyed me that the very thing I was terrified of for this film was exactly what happened. I predicted it down to the what. I mean, exactly what happened. I should have taken the $500,000, but if I had, if they'd released the movie that I did not recut with my team, and with an ability to put some of it back together again, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay. It wouldn't. No.
Okay.
It would be much more. Yeah, it would be much more celebrated. And and I don't blame the producers for being nervous and afraid and stuff like that of what's going down. And I get it. It's a scary subject. It's taboo. But if the element is brave and it goes out and does what it needs to do, then it changes the world.
That's what I was hoping. Ripple. I mean, that was the other thing. I mean, and Charlie can tell you this. I mean, the original script he was going to go to a magnet school, and he had some experiment he was working on, which we never saw. And it was, and he had an interview with this guy that was going to come in. And all the interview was, all the morons going to the football game, where's your experiment? Well, I don't really have one. And I just want to say I think he says there is no normal, but that was it. The experiment of the blue petri dish with the red dot was my invention, and Charlie and we worked real hard to make sure that Charlie had, he had these graphics on his computer where he's trying to put molecules together, and we played in the background of the. I don't think it's in the final soundtrack anymore. I can't even remember. We had originally you could hear like he was listening to like NPR, and some astronomer was talking about everything we are was actually created in the heart of a star, all the elements, and we built this thing, this beautiful underpinning for his missions, because otherwise it was just a facile idea that, I'm good at science. Well, prove it. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't see you being good at science. I see you being, a tough guy in football and funny, but I don't see you being
Whoa, Patrick, I'm fair at football.
Fair at football, right? Larry Preston. and so the whole blue-red dot thing and the assembly with everyone in blue and Angus is wearing red, and didn't you get the memo? I didn't know. All of that ostracization and all of that otherness was not in the script. It was in the script just in terms of he was being picked on, but it didn't. In a visual storytelling sense, and in a way of actually grounding him in an effort to do something that ultimately clicked for him as, I don't care if I get into the magnet school, but all this work on this experiment, all this time, I've not been successful. I've not realized that what's wrong is I'm trying to somehow integrate these two things when I don't have to integrate them. I don't have to make the red dot fit the blue pool. In fact, it's the opposite. What I have to do is allow that red dot to say, fuck you, to the blue petri dish, right? And so once we hit on that, and once I hit on that, that allowed us to do something that, has, not only did it elevate the film, but Charlie and I were talking earlier, we've got a mutual friend who created a poster, and when the eventual Criterion edition comes out, the cover, and all it is, and it would have been the best cover in the universe for the film or for the poster. It's just a black poster with a blue field and a little red dot in it. I
would propose that the entire movie would be recut with these missing scenes and call it the father cut. I mean, seriously, this is 2020. That movie would do very well right now. And it's funny that you say that, because I even remember like 10, 11 years back when they put out P.S. I Love You. No, I Love You, Philip Morris, starring Jim Carrey as one of the greatest jailbreakers of all time. Well, prison breakers of all time. It's like a mixture of Brokeback Mountain meets Catch Me If You Can, and it's a brilliant, beautiful movie. And even then, they had cold feet. And I'm like, man, re-release all these movies that didn't do well or were cut down or compromised. Now's the time.
You know, it was funny. I was listening to you speak earlier, and I was thinking about this other interview I did with Kate and them, and we were talking a little bit. And when I was listening to their previous podcast he did in November about Angus, they were like, yeah, he seemed like a teenager that was kind of struggling through this stuff. But what was really missing were those bookends, the scenes with my dad and different scenes with my grandfather and my mom that were the weight, as opposed to me just being this kid who's like getting through it. Yep. Those really added the gravitas to that original story. I remember doing a movie called Who's Your Daddy? And I found out the distributors were the same distributors from Angus. And I didn't see a preview for Angus until like a week before it came out. And I was like, no, stop. And it failed. That movie failed. I was like, no, I'm telling you, bad idea. You know, people were afraid of this movie.
Well, not only were they afraid of it, they made a critical error beyond cutting it to shreds and taking out. There are so many moments left in the film that are actually dependent on knowing this about his parents and knowing what I was intending for Rick. There are so many things about Rick's performance and Rick's treatment of you that depend on knowing these things. Not only did they gut the movie that way, they ended up, what they never told me until it was just a couple of weeks out, they kept testing it for people from the age of like 12 to 18.
Oh, no.
And I said, why are you even bothering? You can't. I said, no kid in middle school or high school wants to go see a movie that's going to make them cry about middle school or high school. They will shun it. But I mean, the truth is, you know, I mean, I said, test it for people in college, maybe people in college and graduate school, or maybe people fresh out of graduate school who are out in the world and life is kicking their ass. But right. Man, all the things they went back and they're reminiscing like mad about high school, right? And they're like, no. And they finally told me, said, we've spent our entire ad budget already. We've already bought all the time on MTV. And I said, nobody who's watching MTV is going to think this movie's cool. Right?
Just because of the Green Day thing. They thought, oh, Green Day's in this movie, so all the kids will flock.
They were sure that would just send people clamoring to the theaters, right?
Yeah, nobody in Vietnam experiencing Vietnam wants to watch a movie about Vietnam
right.
Many years after it's passed.
Exactly. You know, you don't see a lot of World War II vets didn't want to go see Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan. They ultimately did because they heard how good it was, and their grandkids said, please come see this with me. But
well, Patrick, that's how this movie, I mean, to me, that's how this movie has found its audience. You know, it's those people that remembered it happened, went and said, wait a minute, holy God. And
wow.
They're like, whoa. Yeah.
Well, and that was the thing, again, with the soundtrack, you know, they really honestly believed that the soundtrack was just going to sell this movie. And as much as I love the soundtrack, and I really do, I'm really happy with all the songs on there. Remember, I didn't know who Green Day was. In fact, it's a funny, quick story. I was in line one day in the lunch line. I think we were shooting down at the auditorium, for the dance scene, for the winter dance, and Bob Cavallo is in line next to me, and he kind of sidles up and he goes, hey, I got some really great news for you. And I'm like, what? And he goes, we just found out that Billy Joel's gonna write a song for you, right? Now, you notice how I pronounced Billy Joel? I said, Billy Joel is gonna write a song for us? And he goes, that's crazy. And he goes, wait, what did you say? I said, you just told me Billy Joel is going to write a song for us. And he goes, oh, bless your heart. And he goes, no, Billy Joe. And I'm like, who's Billy Joe? And he goes, Green Day. And I'm like, okay. I was like, yay, whatever. And so we got this song. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And I know it's very popular. But it was like, of all the songs on the album, was probably my least favorite. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but because I wasn't a big Green Day fan because I didn't know who they were. And I no disparaging of Green Day. I think they're great. I got to know who they were. Remember, I was all about Offspring at that point. I had temp scores.
Yeah, Offspring was who we were originally like, oh, it's Offspring,
Yeah, that's who we had in the gymnasium scene. And the thing that I was all about was that while I was scouting locations in Minnesota for the film, I had my little, I think it was a Walkman CD player or whatever. I don't know what it was at that time. I think it might have been. And I was playing lots of songs, just trying to find stuff for the soundtrack beyond what I was already sort of required to use by the management. I couldn't figure out how to open the movie. I just couldn't figure out what the opening of the movie was. And then I found this song by this group, Love Spit Love, which was Richard Butler from Psychedelic Furs solo project.
Amazing.
And I played this song as I'm driving along, and we just happened to be going past the high school, the Owatonna High School where we were going to shoot. And I look at the field, this empty field, and I'm hearing this song, and I went, this would make a really good theme song. What's missing? Wait a minute. Holy sh! And it hit me that if I were to tusk this song, Fleetwood Mac, if I were to put in a marching band with this song, it would make the ultimate high school opening titles band thing. So I got the composer David Russo and Dawn and Dawn heard me pitch it, and she goes, "That's interesting. Let's see if they'll do it." And so they got in touch with Richard Butler. He said, "That sounds amazing. Let's do that." Right. So I then got David Russo to fly back to Gurnee, Illinois, to Warren Township High School and record my high school marching band playing along with Richard Butler's song. And then David flew back to LA, got in the mixing studio with Richard Butler, and they remixed the song. Now that song, when it came out, was kind of a minor dent in the college radio circuit. When it came out again with the marching band and the Angus soundtrack, it became a big hit in college stations. It was like, and again, I kept saying, they love it in college. Right? They don't love it in high school, but they love it in college because they miss high school. Right? That's probably one of the things I'm most kind of delighted by is what happened with that song. It's an anthem, and I probably get more people talking about that than almost anything about the movie in some respects.
Well, gentlemen, I just got to say that both me and my darling life partner Melissa, she hasn't seen that movie in 20 years, and she's just like,
you showed it to her
and then I showed it to her the other night, as I said to you guys, I would in the messages, and she's like, "Oh, I can't wait to see the beginning. What they do, how they merge the marching band in that song. Like before the movie even begins, you just feel it's tragic but brave. Like that's what it is. It sounds lonely yet hopeful." And it's just it's an achievement, and it's so nice to know that it means as much to you as it did to me, because I'm like, man, this movie hasn't even started yet.
It's alchemical. It was one of those things that, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now. When I remember the first time I heard the rough mix of the new version, and I kind of burst into tears because I was like, we've got something. Now we have to fulfill what this song is promising. Yeah. And what this opening is promising. Online and on like Spotify and stuff, I see people with the Angus soundtrack posted, and they don't have the marching band version. They've got all it is they've collected the songs, and they took the Love Spit Love song and just dropped it in there. And I was like, oh shit, did they take it off for some rights issue? Is my high school marching band like soaking them for royalties or something?
I know it wasn't on the CD. That the marching band version was not on the CD. And I remember being a little bummed, despite the fact I finally had that Green Day song and I didn't have to put my tape recorder up to the television anymore. I was a little bummed that I couldn't put that moment in my headphones. Because when you put it in your headphones, as we all know, it's a whole different experience. And
it's a weird. I was actually quite now. But that having been said, when you go on like Apple Music or iTunes now and download it, it's on there.
Perfect. Well, remember the reason it didn't come out for a while, the reason they petitioned for it to get released and all that. Warner Brothers, I can't remember who I spoke to, but Warner Brothers didn't have the rights to the music when they took over the license for the film. Right. So that's why it didn't get released. And all these other movies kept coming out. People were like, "Where the hell is Angus? Wasn't that bad?" And it turned out it was because of the music rights. And Warner Brothers finally people just kept petitioning and kept petitioning. Warner Brothers finally cracked and said, "Okay, we'll spend the $30,000 a song," and whatever it was, to get the song.
And apparently, the reason Angus, the movie itself, has not been released in any other formats other than that kind of direct to DVD-R thing that Warner's does is that,
and Amazon,
and Amazon. Apparently, Warner's doesn't really have the rights to the film anymore. Apparently, New Line sold the movie to some private individual in like Colorado who's sitting on these rights, and apparently they had a carve out for direct to video. I mean, like they had some little carve out that allowed them to do what they do, but they don't have any control, and neither does New Line, that there's some guy, I don't know his name, it'd be good to do the research, who actually owns all the rights to the film.
Wow. Well, hey, Mr. Gentleman in Colorado there, you have a chance to change the world a little bit. You can...
this would be a real good time. People are hungry for content.
Yeah. You can sparkle a riff right there, You can touch the water and create a wave.
Make it happen, Kevin.
As we talk about this movie, we talked about casting and even your natural friendship with Troy. A little callback to what you were saying before about a tonal issue, where it's in a sense where you're like, this movie's more about adults reminiscing about high school. I know what you mean about the snot scene, because that's kind of like that would make the modern adult be like, oh God, it's a movie for 10-year-olds. Because even when I was 12 and I first saw that movie, I wasn't like, but
we did cut out a lot of stuff. I mean, there were a lot of fart jokes. There were a lot of, I actually there were several crew members that we had a great crew. We had a terrific crew of really talented people, but there were 3 or 4 of them that we didn't end up getting, who were all really potentially, who were interested in working with me. They heard about the cast. They were like, they didn't know the kids, but they certainly knew the 3 Oscar winners. And they were like, how'd you get them? And I said, we think we have a project here. This is really, and they read the script and they were like, really, fart jokes? And I'm not going there. And I said, no, we'll fix that. And we did. We actually kind of shook loose a lot of the most of the infantile stuff. Some of it's left, whatever. But that was what all those 13 drafts were about. Between casting Charlie and the rest, and getting down to the work of writing a movie that I thought I could really.
I'm just glad I've never done a movie where the word splooge is in it.
Yeah. I actually passed on a little thing called American Pie.
You have something going tonight, Sherman?
You see that central chick? Burnett?
No.
She's around. Seems she's taking a liking to me. Fellas, it's time she experienced the Shermanator.
And I took this meeting, and it was kind of stupid. I said, guys, there's a really funny movie here. And by the way, the movie you're probably going to make is not the one I would make, and you're probably going to make millions and millions and millions. I just can't do these jokes. Okay. It's not my thing. Not that I don't think you'll reach an audience. And they hated me. They hated me.
You're like, guys,
questioning their film.
You're like, guys, this remake of Porky's is going to kill.
Well, and you know what? I'll say this about that. And, Porky's, as raw as it was, and maybe it was just a timing difference, maybe, generational difference. Porky's
still one of my favorite movies.
Porky's was a lot more clever.
Yeah.
It didn't revolve around only shock value, right? And only gross out value. I said, and look, it's the same thing with Home Alone, which I passed on as well. I passed on a lot of big movies. When I passed on Home Alone, I basically said to John, I said, look, this is funny, and it's even somewhat heartwarming, and you might even make it more heartwarming. I said, but I'd be all about the heartwarming. I'm not the guy who wants to get up every morning at 4 a.m., get ready, go to the set, and direct, pratfalls only, right? People getting hit with cans and people getting electrocuted. And I knew it would be funny, and I knew John, if whoever he got, but I also knew that at the time, that John was looking for a pair of director-shaped gloves, right? So that he could direct the movie by remote control. And that was what he was trying to do. And he was on set every day, and he was basically really calling the shots.
Wow. That's some teeth, sir.
I'm not kind of built like that, as I've found out, and many others have found out. Later, he came back and asked me to do Baby's Day Out. And for that, at least I had the challenge of, there's an element of this that John has no experience with, which is, visual effects and sets and illusion and manipulating a baby without hurting it, there was a challenge there that I could sink my teeth into, even if, again, the script was troubled. With Angus was just this alchemical thing, and it came down to everything, like the music working the way it did, and finding Charlie, finding this cast that really integrated incredibly well, and having didn't hurt to have George C. Scott, Kathy Bates, and Rita Moreno. I think of the experiences of working. I especially think of the experiences of Charlie working with George C. Scott and Kathy Bates on his first film, and the difference between the two of them as well, because on the one hand, George was the kind of guy that was known to give you 2 or 3 takes. The third one, something must have gone horribly wrong with either the camera, or a light fell and started a fire, or you weren't getting this beyond a second take, right? Because
he was really kind to me when we did. Remember, we started shooting that Bedroom Superman's Not Brave scene at the end of the day, and I could not get through it because it was something we were trying to tackle, and I couldn't get through it. And you were really kind to me, and so was George. And we came back the next day and finally were able to nail it. But I was so scared because that was on set, and set was shot after, shooting on location and that was in California. But when we had shot the scene where Grandpa's already dead, and Anna Thompson, gives me the box, and I open it up, and Patrick wrote this note inside that said, "Your grandmother just died," and I'm like bursting out in tears. He did that. He really knew how to work with me and play with me and help me get there, because I didn't have the chops, and I remember her being very pissed that this kid couldn't get crying down, and handle himself on set. And it really kind of crushed me. And Patrick's like, "I got this," and by the third take, he wrote that for me. And it just, and I was like, okay, I hope George is going to be like this. And he wasn't, man. Wow. Just a consummate professional who knew I was a kid, and knew I wasn't an actor, and he really help get me through that as well.
When he did, I remember the Irish swoon scene in the kitchen, which was meant to, again, it's near the end of the day. We got George having to do a fairly physical thing for George at that point. And it's, a lot of dialogue and a lot of reaction and timing. And it was a lot to do. It was a lot of heavy lifting for George, but it was even more heavy lifting for Angus. His timing determined whether it was working or not. And there were all kinds of problems and it went up.
I remember the main problem. I couldn't say, and he goes on a shooting spree killing large people.
Right.
I couldn't say large people properly with the right.
It was. I think you were going, and he goes on a killing spree shooting large people, or shooting large, or shooting large people, or whatever. It was everything but large, and I kept going, large. It's large. And George, bless him, man, he did 15 takes to get that. Right. I felt like Stanley Kubrick, man. I don't think I'd ever done 15 takes on anything in my life. Right.
Well, you haven't worked with me yet. So, well, look forward to 30.
So George did 2 things. The first thing, I'll do the serious story first. I was so intimidated by working with George, even though I'm the one who had talked him into doing the movie by meeting with him out at his house and going through what I intended. Well, first thing was the first day of shooting was for George was the dance studio, right? So I get there. I always come to the set before anyone else gets there, so I can just have some quiet time, even before the electricians, before anybody, anything, so I can just sit and look, right? So I get there, and then the DP shows up, and the electricians, they start pre-lighting, and Charlie shows up, and other people show up to, Rita Moreno's in makeup. And then all of a sudden George walks in, and he looks around, he sees everybody working, and he goes over and he takes his chair, his little director's chair, and he gets out his newspaper and he sits down with his back to me about 30 feet away across the set. I'm like, uh-oh. So we're waiting. It's supposed to, and I say to the DP, so how much longer for lighting? And he's like, Alex Gruzinski's like, I don't know, maybe, half hour. I said, okay, you sure? Yeah, no problem. Right.
Him and Moish, right?
Yeah. Right. Half an hour goes by and I'm like, hey, how are we doing? Right. And he's like, we're working on it. Right. 45 minutes go by. An hour goes by. George is still sitting there reading his paper with his back to me, right? Finally, all of a sudden I hear this, and I look, and George does this. He goes, "Hey, Chief, when are we going to get this baby off the ground?" Right? And the people in the lifts and the grips, the makeup, everybody, the set dressers, everybody's like, they're just like, holy shit. And I'm like, and he goes, takes his paper up again, right?
Oh God.
Shit. So now I'm thinking, okay, there are only two answers to that question. One is, sorry, Mr. Scott, we're doing the best we can. The other was what I did, which was recall his moment out on the old Roman battlefield in Patton, where he hears the distant trumpets, and I just go, and he's waiting for Rommel to show up, and I just look at George, and he's still got his back to me. He's reading his paper, and everybody's staring at me like, "What are you going to do, punk?" And so I just go. The trumpet sounds, and George is like this, and I see he goes. He turns around and goes, "You're all right, kid." And from that moment on, he would do anything. Wow. Anything I asked. If 15 takes, no problem. But the other thing he did that was so beautiful was, a lot of the times he would nail it on the first take, no problem. Would nail it on the second take. But sometimes I needed to do it again because either, Ariana or Charlie or whomever, they weren't quite there yet. And sometimes I would actually do it again because I really needed it to be something different that he did. Instead of, chewing me out or giving me a hard time, I would often say, "Listen, George, do you mind? I'd like to do like this a little different. Here's an adjustment I'd like to try to make if it's okay with you. I mean, your way is great. I really like what you did." He goes, "Well, I don't like it, but I'll do it for you." In front of the whole crew. And so then he'd do it. And instead of phoning it in, right? Instead of just tossing it off so I get my, satisfaction, sometimes I'd say, "You know what, George? First of all, if I loved it, I'd say, 'My God, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that.' And he'd be like, 'All right, well, at least you have it both ways, right? No problem, right? Beautiful thing to do.' But the better thing that he did, where there were times where I was like, 'Wow, I'm sorry I asked you to do that. Your way was,' and he goes, 'No, that was better. Your way was better. Use that.' In front of the whole crew.
Oh, wow.
And out loud. And it's so giving, so incredibly giving. Kathy, and this will segue into talking about Kathy and Charlie, because this is pretty awesome. So when I never met Kathy Bates or even spoke to her on the phone or anything when she accepted the part. She was offered the part, sent the script, she read it, was talked. I think Dawn was the one who probably talked to her personally on the phone. I was, she was told I had George C. Scott, I had, Rita Moreno, and she responded to the material, but she was in the middle of shooting Dolores Claiborne, which was one of the worst experiences of her life, right? I mean, she was apparently it was so strenuous and so difficult. The day I met her was her first day of shooting in the makeup trailer, right? We had never spoken. I just knew I was going to be directing Kathy fucking Bates. And so I went to the makeup trailer and I'm thinking, how do you start this relationship? What do you even do, right? Because I'm a huge fan. But so I go in and I literally kneel in front of her while she's getting her makeup done. And I'm looking up at her and I say, "Kathy, this is super awkward, and it's so nice to obviously have you here and to meet you. I'm like a little bit of a loss because we've had no chance to, I think you're amazing, and I want you to feel all the, to do whatever you think is blah, 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 blah," and I'm yammering. And she's looking at me and she kind of softens a little bit and then she hardens a little bit. And she just grabs me by my shirt, literally. And she pulls me up. She goes, "Listen to me. Just fucking direct me. Just direct me." I said, "What?" She goes, "You seem like a good guy. You seem smart. I think we're going to get along." She goes, "But I have no idea what I'm doing on this film." She goes, "I want to be on this film, but I have no idea who this character is yet. I've read the script twice. I just got off a plane from Nova Scotia. She goes, tell me what you want and I'll do it. And I said, and she's starting to go down that rabbit hole and I'm thinking, I'm not going to do results-based directing with this woman. She's a genius, right? She goes, no. You listen to me. Give me line readings if you need to, right? Just say it the way you want me to say it, and I'll say it back if we have to get through this until I can find my balance here. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to give line readings. I'm going to do it like this, Gabby. And she's like, I'm serious, man. We'll find it, but you got to take me there if you have any idea what this character is about and what you want it to be. And I thought, wow, because you wouldn't be doing that with George, right? And they have to act in scenes together and somehow have to direct both of them and not piss the other one off, right? And she was just amazing. I mean, she of course, very, very quickly got who this character was. I never had to do any of that terrible stuff that she was going to allow me to do. But there was a moment that's actually not in the film where right after she comes in and discovers Angus dancing with what's her name?
Wanda.
And he deflates her. And oh no, this is the moment where she comes up and says Haagen-Dazs, right? They go downstairs, and the next scene is a scene of him sitting at the table across from Kathy Bates, subdued nighttime lighting, the crickets coming out through the windows, and they're sitting there sharing a pint of Haagen-Dazs, right? Now, we shot this scene again, end of the day. Charlie's been working for weeks, and he's delirious, right? And on this particular day, we'd already done a whole bunch of work. And so he's sitting there, and they're passing stuff back and forth, having this dialogue about girls and dad and the whole thing. And Charlie, every take for like 7 takes, just can't help himself and just starts busting up laughing in the middle of the scene, right? And Kathy I can see it's not that she's getting pissed, it's that she's getting tired. And it finally, like it was take 8 or something, she's taking, he passes the ice cream back to her. She looks at him and he goes, and finally, and she without breaking stride, she takes the ice cream, takes a little thing of it, and she goes, it's too bad this isn't Uta Haagen-Dazs. Famous actor,
oh my
Uta
God,
Hagen.
yes, Uta Hagen.
And the crew lost it. We all lost it. And Charlie didn't know who Uta Hagen.
I didn't get it. Yeah,
so he was like, why is everyone laughing? But I mean, there were so many amazing moments of humor and fun and great performances. I mean, everybody worked so hard, and they did support Charlie, and they supported Charlie because even though sometimes he would lose his concentration or he was never, ever, ever, ever not trying.
Yeah.
Because that's
the
experienced actors only care about that. They only care, are you trying? If you mess up or you make a mistake or you laugh or you break character, that just happens, right? Especially with young new people trying it out. But nobody ever, and each one of them said to me privately how much they adored it. So, I mean, that's a real credit to Charlie,
For sure.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that brings back 2 stories. The first time I met George, this guy, he gets out of the car with a limo, and I'm playing basketball with Chris and them and Salim, and he comes out, he goes, well, you must be Charlie. And I'm like, General Patton knows my name? I had prepared, like I was ready for this. But then I remember that was the first day. The ice cream scene was the first day, Patrick. It was at the end of the evening. We had already shot the Uncle Barry RSVP stuff, which I had no clue what RSVP meant at all in that entire day. I'm like, Uncle Barry RSVP? You didn't tell me. And I had a list, not to mention all that stuff. But I remember Kathy, after she was done with makeup, I don't know if you recall this story, and Dawn had introduced me to her because you were setting up. And she goes, hey, Charlie, I'd love for you to come help me. And I was like, cool. And so to build a relationship on the first day, before we have to have this funny chemistry, she goes, look, I have to pick this cover. I have the final say-so of what the cover of this movie is going to look like. It's called Dolores Claiborne. And she goes, I'm down to 2. These are the 2. Which one do you like? Which one gives you? And she told me a little bit about the feeling of this person, the character. She didn't tell me about the movie. She told me about who this person was.
Right.
And I said, oh, it's this one, that evokes that in me. And she's like, and I said, that's how I feel about it. And she goes, okay, that's the one. And so essentially I picked the cover for Dolores Claiborne because she was bonding with me. And then George C. Scott, another story, talking about, I tried a lot. I was still a goofball. I was still a silly head, young guy, smart ass, but there's this scene with my grandpa and he's playing chess with Irvin Kershner, the director of Empire Strikes Back, Mr. Patrick. And I'm walking back and forth and we're talking about girls and he's shooting the lines back at me and there's two cameras running and my pants, I don't have a butt. My pants fell down while we were shooting. Do you remember that? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I did not stop. I didn't.
Well, because you were from here, it didn't matter. It was this on you.
I kept going no matter what. And when it cut, everybody was laughing. And I went up to George and I'm so sorry. Here's what happened, but I kept going, But I had a sense of the grandiose nature, especially knowing who George Scott was and then learning who Irving Kershner was.
That was great. Well, the two things about that day that really stand out there. One, so Irving Kershner plays his chess partner. And what happened was I had been, one of the last parts I cast was this silent bit of this old chess guy. And I thought, I'm going to do a cameo with this. I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be my Uncle Jay from Texas, or it's going to be it'll be somebody special to me. And then I thought of Irvin, who I had met through Gary Kurtz, who I was working with on developing a bunch of projects. And I loved Irvin. He was just, obviously he's a hero and he made one of my favorite movies of all time. And he was just a wonderful guy. So I called him, hey, hello, hey, Irvin. He goes, hey, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm shooting this little movie and we're going to be in South Pasadena. I know you don't live that far from there. Are you, it's going to be on Friday. I think it was actually a Saturday, I think, because we were shooting 6-day weeks. And I said, would you mind coming and doing just like for a couple of hours, a silent bit with George C. Scott? And he goes, George C. Scott? He goes, I directed George in The Flim Flam Man in 1966 or whatever it was. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. And he did. And he goes, I haven't seen him since. And I said, well, would you like to surprise him? And he goes, absolutely. Where do I got to be? And he wrote it down. And so on the appointed day, George comes in, he's all made up, ready to go. And he sits down and he goes, so who am I playing chess with? Right. And I said, well, here he is now. It's just some guy we thought would be right for the part. And he goes, all right, whatever, come on over, whatever. And he looks and he goes, holy shit. And so Irvin sits down, they're yapping it up and having the time of their lives, right? And it was fantastic. It was just so much fun that I got to have Irvin Kershner be in my movie. And he did a great job. And they had a good time. But what happened that really took the cake that day was, since it was a Saturday, it was also the day that several things were happening in South Pasadena near this park. One, everybody and their brother were out with their lawnmowers or their leaf blowers or their kids, and there was an air show going on over the nearest airport. So George was supposed to do this big soliloquy, right? And it's like a page long, right? Again, on this time, it went up to like 23 takes at this point, right? And we've got PAs racing all over the neighborhood with $20 bills trying to make people stop with their lawnmowers or whatever. And he keeps getting interrupted because we wanted to do it in one, right? Of course, it's George C. Scott with this great monologue. We wanted to slowly push in on him. And so he finally, we're at like take 24 and George, is at the end of his fucking tether. He's ready to go, right? And I'm thinking and we're getting further than we've ever got. There's no noise. Nothing's happening. Everything's going fine. Further than we ever got. Further than we ever got, right? He's like 2 lines from completing when somebody's cell phone goes off. It was one of either the producer or line producer or something. It was somebody
who had a cell phone.
Somebody had a cell phone in their pocket at Video Village, right? Wasn't mine, thank God. And and the whole crew turns white, right? That even the extras are like, and George is in the middle of the line. The cell phone goes off. He stops. He stares for about 3 seconds into the air. Then he reaches into his pocket and he picks up an imaginary phone. He goes, "Sweetie, I told you never to call me here. This is the war room," right? from Dr. Strangelove. And he busts the tension. The crew goes wild. He laughs. And he goes, "Let's do it again right now." Then we do it again and we get it, right? Okay. He was magic, man. The guy was magic. So cool.
It's really sweet, the scene, especially his death scene. Originally in the original script, did he die like that? Like with him and Angus have their thing where he puts on the vinyl and wakes him up, and then this time is the time he doesn't wake up. Because what's funny is when I first saw that movie, I'm like, someday that's not going to wake him up, and I was dreading it before it even happened. Like in the original script, was it always going to go like that? Was the grandpa going to die because of his new bride's negligence?
I don't remember a different version.
What I remember, and I may be wrong, but my memory of it is, and maybe it's just the song we chose, but I kind of remember that it did happen in the same moment, but there was no record player.
Okay.
And there was no, none of. I think that was an addition that we added in during some of the rewrites, just to make it, just to have a motif and a through line of, show it once, show it twice, show it the third time, surprise kind of thing. You know what I mean?
It's time for your pill, and he's not there.
Right. I think it was just it's time for your pill, and there was none of that interplay of the record player or a song or anything like that. But it did happen in that way. There were a lot of. I mean, the monologue that the monologue that he says at the end about
Superman's not break
into that monologue I wrote, but Jill Gordon wrote the monologue about Superman, and I think that was largely unchanged. I don't think I might have made some nips and tucks in it or whatever, but I think that's what Jill Gordon originally wrote, and that was one of the things that attracted me to the film in the first place.
No one's ever approached me in a fast food restaurant and said, "Do you want to be a star of a movie?" I go to auditions and they say, "Would you like to play the junkie number 6?" When it must be beyond intimidating to be on that set, but what is a scene or a performance in that movie where you're kind of like, yeah, I may have been the new kid, but that scene, I acted. And before you answer that, may I just say that your reaction to your grandfather when you come downstairs to tell everybody at the wedding that things have, that your grandfather is no longer with you, your look says 1,000 words, and I think you just knocked that out of the park. I think that was absolutely beautiful.
Well, that's thanks to Patrick, because he was at the top of those fake stairs helping me out, getting me in that moment. I remember that distinctly. We were on set for that. Who was the gentleman that played my other father in that? My stepfather?
Oh my God! Now I'm embarrassed.
Robert.
He's terrific, and he's.
Wait, there was a stepfather?
Oh yeah, his dad is married to another man, and it's Robert. Robert Curtis Brown.
I didn't order enough food.
Meg, there is enough food here to feed 2 armies.
I remember getting your dialogue. That one took some time, but I remember doing the dance one in one. Do you remember? Because you guys brought in a photo double for me, and it freaked me out because I was like, this guy looks just like, I'm like, oh my God, he's got everything. And I was like, I got to get this. I got to nail it. They're going to replace me with a Charlie Bot. And
you did it. And you got it.
And James actually really went through that table. We were shooting it, and we were supposed to, set it up, and we just did it. And I was so like getting through it, and not being a professional, I was just like, fucking, you're going down.
And when you pushed him back towards the stage and he fell back, I'm pretty sure he clocked his head pretty hard on those steps. And what a champ, man. I mean, because that's the take we used. And it looks for all the world like he really hits his head, because he did. And he didn't break character. He went right. He was stunned, and you can see it. That's not acting at that point, but he went right on with it. Same with Chris when he got slammed by the in the dumpster.
He gets slammed in the head of the dumpster.
Hit hard, and he still just was like, "Let's go, let's do it again, let's go."
Chris was my rock through this whole film. He's still, my best friend to this day.
He's awesome.
Yeah, I hope we get to work together again.
Oh, when we do.
What was it?
I said when we do the sequel.
Right,
Or the sequel.
So what you're we were talking about real reactions and all that kind of stuff. I would just like to say to this day, and I'm just going to say just as an audience member who saw this movie in I guess 96, I was 12 years old. I think it helped prevent people from growing up to be dicks, to be honest. Because up until that point, it's like fat people are funny. And every time you punch them, they don't feel the pain and all that kind of stuff. It kind of brought a real soul. It brought a conscience to someone as they grow up. Like, we don't have Jiminy Cricket, but we have movies like this to provide us with life lessons of what we should and shouldn't do. And nothing. And I mean nothing. I've seen a lot of movies about bullying, but that scene where they trip him and Chris falls on his arm and starts crying, that cuts through my soul, even to this day.
Help!
Come on, man, let's go.
And kudos to Chris's performance.
It was amazing. And that was also an invention that was not in the original script. In the original script, they just said, give us something or else, that kind of thing. And I said, this friendship is not going to be ruined over a mild threat of, hey, if you don't help us, we're going to beat you up, dude. I said, we have to traumatize the audience. And I said, I want to break his arm on camera. I want to break his arm on camera. And I want the audience to think, oh, shit, that stunt went wrong and they broke his arm. And Chris nailed it. The sound work really helps. His performance of it is exactly, it's gut wrenching. It is
that was the scene that I had seen the new cut for Angus when he had to go in and redub some of the ADR for the cry. He had to match his cry. He did it like almost dead on too. And I'm crying in the ADR room.
Oh, he nailed it, and he there were people on set. Some people said, this is too much. You can't do this. It's too much. It's just too much. I said, no, this is what really happens. I said, we're not making a Disney comedy. This is what people do to each other in bullying. And I, though the movie did not succeed financially, it succeeded in many other ways, not the least of which is that since then, I've gotten more email or social media postings or whatever it might be, even real, letters in the mailbox, from people all over the country and even the world who said, your movie saved my life. I'm not kidding when I say this, that had I not seen your movie, I probably would be dead or I would have killed somebody by now. And that I actually have an old high school professor who I hadn't heard from in decades who reached out after he saw the movie. Oh, this would have been 5 years after it came out, and said, I just saw you were online and I just wanted to reach out and let you know that your movie Angus is a central part of my, I teach a course called Deviance. In sociology in college, and your movie is one of the centerpieces of it about being deviant, which not in the pejorative, but in the positive, that deviance from the norm and deviance from the herd is incredibly powerful and important. And I said, well, good. That's what I was trying to say. And he goes, no, I recognize what you were trying to say. So
there are several teachers who do that have reached out. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, please tell.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Charlie. Please tell us about these set experiences. Like, and it's a good question of when did you guys realize? Like, of course, you're a young guy and you're the star of a movie, and then it comes out and it doesn't do well. You guys both take that kind of personally because this is an artistic. This is a film that is a part of your soul. You put it out into the world, and because of strange marketing, including the little bubble on the VHS saying Troy and Angus are the newest comedic duo. When did you guys realize that this movie had a second life? That it found its way through the darkness, if you will, and people started to hold it near and dear to their souls and shit.
Well, I knew it was a flop. The minute they sent me the VHS cassette previs and it said Charlie Talbot. Actually, Angus gave me my moment. There's one thing that movie taught me was life is moment to moment. It really is. And I remember everything moment to moment. And one of the greatest moments of my life was that girl that I was in love with from kindergarten to 12th grade was in the theater with her friends that always picked on me and bullied me, and she never did. And I was watching a preview for Mortal Kombat when Angus popped up, and I knew her friends were behind me, and I was like, ha! Yeah, and I pointed to her friends standing up in the theater, and I was like, that's it. This movie can be a bomb or success. I just got to see the look on the person that I cared most about in the world, and she was excited to see it. And then I think my second audition was for Mallrats, the lead Mallrats. But it was one of those things where I didn't really think about it because I didn't have anything before. I just knew that my life was not going to be, hopefully, going in the direction of me staying at home, being on welfare, having a rough rest of my young, starting into my adulthood. I now had a goal and a focus which I did not have before, which I owe very much to Patrick. And there's been so much heartache, and there's been so much, so crushing moments. But for all of those few moments, those moments where the stars align just right for you, and I'm here. I'm talking to you 25 years later about something that I did with a great group of people, and it's still affecting people's lives just the way every movie before that affected my lives.
You're still here.
And I'm still here, asshole. And that's that's the beauty, and and then about I would tell you, it never really died off. People would always recognize me. Chris and I were best friends for years upon years upon years. So I never really got forgotten, because when Chris was successful and we would always be together, they'd see us and be like, holy, you guys are friends? Yeah, and we're like, yeah, best friends, And we did 14 projects together since then, And like I said, he's still my best friend. So it's one of those things where that didn't affect me. Would I want it to be a great hit? Yes, but I wanted the original message that Patrick and the producers originally wanted, and everybody at the core of this project wanted, and that didn't happen. So I'm very happy that it's reaching people and helping a whole different real subset. It should have helped a few different subsets of people, but it's helping a few different kinds of subsets that it's introducing me. It broadened my world. I went from very narrow-minded young guy who's like, oh, he chewed me out of this, and make fun of myself because I'm fat, and they'll love me. That all changed because of this film. And then I started getting letters, probably about, I'll tell you as quick as it affected me, how quickly it affected me. A girl saw the preview. Hi, Melissa. A girl saw the preview on Don Juan DeMarco in my high school year. 3 years after the movie comes out, 2.5 years after the movie comes out, she finds me. She becomes my first real love interest, and she finds me through the internet in 1997, just because this movie affected her life. And I'm like, you know what? If you're going to go through that trouble, I'm going to give you the time of day. And since that moment, people have sent me letters constantly. I get letters, I get emails, I get texts. In fact, this whole quarantine, I've done nothing but, I'm preparing for a new role, and I just finished one. But this downtime has been good, because what I've been doing is I've been searching all of the hashtags for Angus, and I've been reaching. And this is how I heard that podcast, that they were like, "No, it's okay," And 12 hours later, I'm doing a podcast with them about the movie Fear, and then we do Angus Strikes Back, and stuff like this. I'm going to answer these because it affected you, and it's still going. It's not going to stop. It'll be here long after I'm gone, and people that understand the movie for what it became, they're going to pass it on. People are teaching it in schools. What more can I ask? It made its mark. I made the friends I made. I'm here today. I just got done work. I'm going to be braggadocious. I just worked on The Watchmen.
Let him go? Let who go?
The man I brought in for burning down the deli, Fred.
Sorry. I have no idea what you're talking about.
What? You were standing right there. The other officers took the guy to book him.
I think you're having memory problems, Reeves.
I just worked on Underground Railroad with Barry Jenkins. I've worked, I've been in, 2 movies that have, been nominated or won Oscars, and it's all because of my friends. And it all starts with the man in this little screen down here, Patrick, who was like, you know what, this guy's got some troubles and he's funny. Let's give it a shot. And it's still going. It's still going.
It was you. I didn't know if you could act. I didn't care if you could act. I knew you could be you. and you felt like the character I saw when I read Jill's script and what I imagined would happen with it as we developed it. And I was, so that I didn't feel I was actually risking a thing at all, because I didn't want an actor. I wanted a person that could be Angus, and you were Angus. I mean, you were able to be Angus.
Well, it was me, it was.
Well, but it was the right spirit for Angus, and that was what I was,
And there was a kinship working with Patrick that was like I told you, wrote that note about my grandma was ill at the time, and to get these emotions done. Patrick knew how to do that with me without breaking me. In fact, when we were done shooting that scene, I walked over and he let me punch him a bunch. He was just like, "Get it out, buddy, get it out." I get it. And he was like, "I'm sorry. She comes from a different class of actresses, and and neither one of you are wrong. It's just different processes." And I'm starting to learn all of this crazy stuff, and doing the hashtag stuff. The fans, the people that are the Criterion, the fact that it became a DVD because people were petitioning for it. In 2008, 2006, when they started the online petitions, when Facebook popped up. And the first person to friend me on Facebook, the very first person after CDS had created my Facebook for me, was the girl I was in love with from kindergarten to 12th grade. And she married a guy named Charlie who kind of looks like me, and he's an entertainer. And I met them, and they're awesome. They're beautiful people. And it's there's nothing I can say more to thank the fans, because they're still coming, and there's a whole new generation that are learning to love, accept, and push through, especially in today's climate. This is all, cannon fodder. It's it's getting embedded. You can't take it away. And doing the hashtag searches, funny enough, I had never heard the song Wanda by Weezer, Rivers Cuomo. Never heard of it. Didn't know anything about it until last year.
You're so lucky. Your family's normal. Mom drives a big rig. My daddy's gay.
And I reached out and I was just like, dude, I can't believe you wrote that.
I'm the villain in that. The reason you never heard it is I rejected it.
Well, it had to go away too, because it's about the gay fathers.
Well, exactly. But it was never, it actually is. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of theirs. And
oh yeah,
a huge fan. And I it's not that I didn't want a Weezer song in the film. I did.
Which we got one, right?
And we got one, but it wasn't the one that was intended for the film. Instead, I fell in love with other things that they were doing, and we got that. It was interesting because, in a way, I feel like had I been a huge fan of all of these bands going in, I probably would have made choices that weren't as good for the movie. I probably would have chosen things that were great for me, not necessarily great for the story.
Yeah.
No,
it's a good point. I mean, like that slow motion scene you guys were talking about before when you're getting off the bus, that music right there, it's kind of a piece of magic. And if you are a fan of the music too much, you're going to feature the music too much, allow that to become the character as opposed to just highlighting what the characters are doing.
Right.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you'll have 5 montages instead of scenes. And sometimes montages are very effective. The most effective one I can think of is Bonzo Goes to Bitburg and School of Rock, like this 80s Ramones song that nobody knows, but it's amazing. And but that's a highlight also at the same time where you combine the joy the kids were having with the music. And that happens actually where you place the Green Day song in your movie, where there's kind of like this backdrop and they're having kind of a photo shoot, but they're just having the best time ever.
They're having their hair, makeup, and wardrobe tests.
Yeah.
That was attached.
That's what it is.
For the movie.
That montage did not exist in my original cut of the film. Not that I didn't think we could do a montage, but we never shot a montage. What we shot were some other little scenes, and while I was on vacation, the powers that be cut together our hair, makeup, and wardrobe tests with the guys with those bits of other scenes. And look, it works just fine.
It was a good device.
It's a good device. It's not how I would have done it if I'd been allowed to shoot a montage. I would have done it very differently, but I don't mind it that much, and people like it. The song helps a lot. There's nothing wrong with what Chris and Charlie are doing in it, other than the fact that they're not really even in character. They're just being Chris and Charlie.
Yeah, they just wanted to dance around and be goofy.
Look, I got the, but that's fine.
Yeah, but just to interject there, I think it's kind of important that scene's in there, although it's not part of your original vision. But just to me, it's kind of like Angus isn't miserable all the time, especially when he's with his fam. Even like his mom doesn't get him all the time. And his grandfather, is levels above us, the self-confidence that he will eventually get to, but it's definitely not then. But his happy place is kind of Troy. And Troy and him, just that kind of bliss together.
It did show that this is my brother through thick and thin. He's there for me. And it makes the whole destruction of our friendship even, that much heavier.
So my darling Melissa in the other room, when we were watching, she was like, I always wondered why Troy kind of sold Angus out. Like, I know he got hurt and stuff like that, but was that like literally the breaking point? Was he kind of like, I can't take the violence anymore? Like,
no,
really hurting me.
Chris didn't do it. It was a stunt double, a stand-in. That's who handed over the tape. It wasn't Chris.
No,
that's true. It's not even Chris handing over the tape in that shot.
I get it now. That's hilarious.
That is great. Yeah, Chris said, I refuse. I would never sell out Charlie. It is a little more complex than that.
Well, it's a plot device. It had to happen, but story wise,
what I wanted to happen.
Yeah.
What I really wanted to have happen, and I didn't quite get there with the material I was able to shoot. The idea was, for me, it's sort of like in Star Wars. One of the things I always told Gary Kurtz that I wished they had done is that was to have Anakin, his backstory was that he didn't just become evil and pissed off and start killing everybody. He realized at a certain point that the only way to destroy the Emperor was to get as close to him as possible and kill him. But the only way to get as close to him as possible was to become his apprentice. And the only way to do that was to start killing even things he loved for the greater good, right? So that ultimately what Darth is doing is he's allowing himself to go into the dark side, not because he's not in control, but because he's completely in control, but he's making a complex and incredibly difficult choice to become a villain to ultimately save the galaxy, which I thought would be really profoundly interesting and cool, right?
Yeah, a little bit better than I killed them, all of them. I hate sand.
But with Troy, now just take that model and imagine a little guy who has no power of any kind, right? And I wrote the stuff when he says, when Angus says, you just don't know what it's like, and he goes, excuse me, fuck you, Angus. Right? I don't think he says it in the final movie, but in the version I shot, he says, fuck you, Angus. I wanted Troy, yeah, he got hurt, but he's used to it. Even if he got his arm broken, so what? He's going to get things broken. I mean, he's the kind of kid who realizes it's going to be my lot in life is to get beat up and pushed around and hung in lockers, blah, 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 blah. But I was hoping to somehow vector it that he makes the choice to hand over the tape to save Angus. And the reason he believes he can save Angus is that he loves Angus so much and believes Angus has courage that he doesn't have, that Troy doesn't have. And he believes that if whatever they do to Angus, he'll get it back up again and again and again, and he will not, and he'll break his nose again if he has to. But no matter what they do to him, he will survive. And so giving the tape to Rick is a way to catalyze Angus's final triumph. It's a way for him to save his friend from any further bullying by Rick, because he knows Angus will win. You couldn't cut anything out of that scene. In other words, there's no way to have cut that final scene to be as moving and interesting as it is without Charlie nailing it.
Yeah.
All the reactions in the world of everybody else. And by the way, Larry Pressman, what a treasure as the principal. Kevin Connolly, Perry Anzalotti as the tuxedo salesman.
Yeah.
That sequence, again, the perfect triumvirate, well, actually quadruplet of Chris, Charlie, Perry, and George Scott in that tuxedo scene is what made all of that work. Because all the dialogue in that scene was totally new, and I made it all up, and I thought, this is either going to work really well or it's going to just,
It's purple.
It's plum.
Oh, Charlie's come back in a kind of new form. He's mutated.
He's in the magical form of still frame. It is so lovely talking to you. Like, you wear your heart on a string. You wear your heart on your sleeve, and I think that's why every single interview I've ever done with you is the best interview I'll ever do in my life. But frankly, every time I talk to you, there's like this, evolution of it, because I think this is the longest we've ever gone. But at the same time, I'm like, you were saying it's just like sometimes you got in trouble for being as true to yourself and as honest and stuff like that. But at the same time, as an interviewer, I get gold from you. But I can imagine that through your career and stuff like that, because you won't sell out or you won't do the things that don't feel true to you, that it can have an effect on that. Especially when you're like, well, I didn't want to do Home Alone. I didn't want to do American Pie. To me, as an audience member, like, what do you mean you didn't want to do that? But, I also get what it's like doing something you're not supposed to do. And,
And that's exactly it. It's not that it is in no way a judgment of the projects being viable or great or even not expecting them to go on and do really, really well for the people that we're trying to make them. For me, it was only about, if I can't get up every morning dying to do it, then I'm not going to die doing it. And dying doing it is what makes it hopefully somewhat good. There are a lot easier ways to make money than make movies.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not in it for the money. I'm not in it for the fame. I'm to my detriment a lot. I'm in it for the messages. They used to say, if you want to send a message, go to Western Union. I want to affect people with the films, even the goofy, Baby's Day Out, the stuff that appealed to me more than anything, the comedy appealed to me, but what I would love to have done better and would like the script to have done better and like me to have done better and everything else was, to me, the story of the baby and the relationship with the mom was more important than all of the comedy in the damn film, So, and the same thing with 52577, which as you're aware, even Space Invaders ultimately at the end of the day is trying to be about a father-daughter relationship and about keeping a family together or having some kind of a family in a new place when you're alone. They're all silly films.
Yeah.
I often say that, I've made 4 or 5 movies and my first film is actually 52577.
I'm so glad you, I'm sorry, I turned it off and can't drop back in, but I didn't want to hear you saying nice things about me. But I remember, in 52577, I was so excited to try to help you. Back in number 07, I tried to shoot some stuff for you to pool, and then I came out with the drone. I drove up to New Orleans.
Charlie showed up. He just showed up and he had a drone and we were shooting some pickup footage and some additional material. And Charlie just said, I'm here. What do you need? And he helped me AD a whole night on a street with a bunch of extras. And he just took over, man. He became like my producing partner on my reshoots. It was awesome.
For those of you who are wondering what 52577 is, well, Patrick has a very unique story that he's going to have to come on the Ryan Stick Show again to talk about, because it definitely cannot be summed up in a few sentences. It is too great of a tale.
I'm sorry I have to leave, but I would happily come back anytime. We should try to get. Maybe we'll get Chris and Ariana or some folks to join us another time.
Oh, well, we need to do a commentary track where I will just shut up. I will pretty much be like, and go.
Well,
we pretty much made him do that today. We're sorry.
What do you mean? This was the best day ever. Like we're living in a quarantine, and I'm kind of feeling how bad about how good I feel right now just learning about this movie because there's no special features and detailed commentaries and long Wikipedia page. Like I can tell you about who farted on Star Wars till the sun goes down, but I know nothing about this movie. Nothing. And the fact that you and Chris, who played Troy, are such good friends in real life, I love that.
That made me extremely happy over the years too, because I thought to myself, they're getting along so well. They really do like each other. And the usual thing after a film often is that, maybe you've made a couple of friends that you'll work with again, and maybe if you're lucky, you've made a new good friend. But how often actors end up becoming like best friends of having done a film together? I don't think it's very
Or we lived together for 14 years.
I know.
Now I got to say this whole process, it all starts with Patrick, and it goes through my entire cast that was with me on Angus, everyone that worked behind the scenes, the crew, Robert Kent, the sound guy, Alex, Moish, everybody I has made an impression on me, good or bad. They've always ended up great. Straight to the, again, the producers, and the producers took a chance, and the reason the producers are stuck in my head is because, those guys said yes to Patrick because Patrick put his soul out there, and without all these little pieces, these elements, it doesn't happen. It means so much to me to be a part of what was his vision at the time, that I can't express it more.
Well, I'm glad it happened. Happy accidents. Thank God I needed a Diet Coke at 10:30 on a Wednesday night in nowhere, Illinois. And thank God you were coming back from watching bicycle races or something. Thanks, Ryan. This is awesome.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. And Charlie, sometime you got to come back on the show, and we got to talk about non-Angus related things, such as working on the greatest television superhero series that has ever been produced, that has elements in it that was edited out of your movie, but proudly demonstrated in this. And it makes me happy that we've come so far as a society. That
I cried very hard when I got to see a lot of that footage. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. But I'm sorry, it's just one interview per one person.
Okay.
And I thank you both for...
No, I have enough dirt on him that I can twist his arm.
Okay.
Hey, take care, you guys.
Or break his nose. Yeah.